The desert can certainly be a foreboding place. The vast nothingness is certainly a terrifying concept. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Davis as we go exploring in the dark. I used to work in defense, programming robots. I was stationed at an army depot in the Nevada desert, and we had a four-wheeled robot we were building to guard the bunkers there. We were never told exactly what was in the bunkers, but I can only assume they were aliens or nukes or something. Anyway, the robot had a cluster of cameras on it, including an infrared camera. The infrared was really fun to play with at night. It sensed heat, so you could spot coyotes, rattlesnakes, rabbits, and other desert creatures from miles away. One morning I walked into our office, and everyone was crowded around the video console, watching the robot's recorded video from a few hours prior. The video started with the robot driving its usual mindless routine. Then, it picked something up on radar and sounded its alarm and sped over to the radar blip to get a closer look. When it got there, it pointed its color camera, but there was nothing there. Then it tried infrared, and that's when things got scary. There was a ghost standing in the desert in front of the robot. He looked like an old World War II soldier. He was in uniform, with a rifle and with a German Shepherd. The robot kept toggling between the color camera and the infrared, and thus the ghost kept disappearing and then coming back. I'm pretty sure the ghost was confused as well. Eventually the ghost decided that he had better things to do, and so he left. Then, the robot resumed its mindless routine. Just another day in nowhere, Nevada.
I have severe insomnia. I was diagnosed when I was still a junior in high school. My parents found me in the kitchen making pancakes at 3 a.m. I hadn't slept in 4 days. Ever since, whenever stress hits me, I have to take my pills to get some sleep. Of course, it is helpful sometimes to stay awake for longer. I can do much more when I'm not sleeping. I already learned 2 languages that way, and countless assignments were done in the quiet hours after midnight. But the advantages only come for short. Staying awake for longer than 3 days lowers my productivity. If you don't rest for too long, all you want to do is bang your head against the wall. Besides, even the most loving and compassionate person has their limits when tired, and I'm already not fond of people, to be honest. My mood is unbearable after the 4th day. Right now I'm in college. I've decided to take a road trip through a certain highway with my friend Sebastian just for the thrill of it. We both know how to drive, so it wouldn't be a problem if the driver needed to rest. Our destination will be our natal city, to visit his parents for their anniversary. After 5 sons, I don't know if his mother sees me more as her daughter or as a possible daughter-in-law, but what really matters is that she makes me the best apple pie in the world and is the nicest person to step on earth. Not even Gandhi can top her. We were pretty happy to come home, naturally. We left on Friday afternoon, prepared to drive throughout the night. I remember it was past 11 p.m. when we decided to stop. That specific highway, a lot of times, is surrounded by miles and miles of desert, but rarely you see a restaurant or city to stop and eat. So when we saw that small diner in the middle of nowhere, it was our call to stop. The plaque a few miles back indicated where we were, between 2 small cities on our map in a big straight line with no exits for at least a few towns. The plaque a few miles back indicated where we were, between 2 small cities on our map in a big straight line with no exits for at least a few towns before and after that lonely diner. Sebastian parked the car in the empty parking lot. That didn't strike us as strange because that diner/gas station was in the middle of fucking nowhere, and they sure as hell don't have that many visitors, specifically when it's late and off season. Rather, I'd find it weirder if we had lots of cars. It was an old diner, in your typical 50s style, with neon lights glowing faintly in the dark night. Inside, I could see the bright fluorescent lights shining upon the turquoise walls. There wasn't a single soul inside, although the neon plaque indicated it was open. As soon as we stepped in, we could feel something different. I never felt such an acute urge to leave. The place was calm and clean, but that peaceful piano version of Suspicious Minds only made my heart jump in pure dread. We sat on a table near the door in silence, waiting for anyone to appear there. There was something about that place that made reality a little bit loose. I suppose that's what happens in isolated places, when there aren't people around to confirm what you just experienced. It was a wild and brand new feeling to me, and equally terrifying. But soon, a voice surprised us. "Hi, welcome to Papa's Diner. How may I help you?" It was an old lady, maybe in her 60s, smiling like a grandmother. Her teeth were perfectly straight, slightly yellow, and completely fake. There was a motherly aura about her, but I could sense something else. Something ominous and very, very malicious. Can we get... What do you want, Cassie?" Sebastian asked me. "I want pancakes with eggs and sausage. Coffee for both of us?" "Yeah, so same for me. And 2 coffees, please." "All right, I'll be back in a minute," she said, going back to the kitchen. The music still played, and I didn't know if I was shivering from fear or cold. It was damn cold there. The air conditioner was blasting. Soon enough, our food was there, and we had our time eating on our 50s piano collection. The food was surprisingly good, actually, considering how far and isolated this place was. Why even bother to make the best meal available if this is the only option in miles? I guess that lady just liked to cook for people. That was probably the only reason this diner was still open, because there wasn't a great flow of people coming through this highway. Hell, we couldn't remember seeing a single car in at least 2 hours. This place sure wasn't making loads of money. I remember we discussed who should be paying. Even broke college students want to have some pride in paying their own bills every once in a while, you know. In the end, we agreed to split it in half, while Grandma thought it was such a modern thing for couples to share the check. We didn't bother to correct her, and soon we left. The sounds of the desert were comforting, like a hug. That place still bugged me for some reason. It was like I wasn't supposed to be there, you see? The more you think about it, the less sense everything makes. There was no house near, nor a city, so where did Grandma live? And why bother to be open at such an inconvenient time when it's off-season and nobody's going through that road? I don't know, the whole thing felt sketchy. I was eager to leave, and since Sebastian was tired, I took the driver's role while he was in the front seat sleeping. Our drive started peacefully. For the next 2 hours, I drove in silence. The road was dark and empty, cutting through the desert sharply, but I wasn't tired. I hadn't slept the night before, but I was still in pretty good shape, actually. My activity peak is usually on my second night awake. It's when I do most in less time. So you can imagine my surprise when I started to feel weird. I don't know how to actually explain what I was feeling back then. I remembered starting by feeling my ears closing up, like when you're underwater, deafening the sounds around me. All of a sudden, the radio began playing a generic indie music that was lower than it had been. And not long after that, I felt someone was with us in the car. We all have heard of that stupid urban legend about the man in the back seat, but can you imagine how terrifying it is to think that maybe this time it just wasn't a tale? We locked the car at the diner, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a third person with us. I couldn't force myself to look back to end this Schrödinger dilemma. I couldn't force myself to look back and end this Schrödinger dilemma for some godforsaken reason. And while I was battling those demons to keep on driving, Sebastian was sleeping like a baby. I thought maybe I should focus more on the road and this whole situation would pass. After a few miles, I saw some really bright stars, really big as well. But those started to move. I pulled the car right then. Sebastian ended up waking up, but that didn't worry me. I just told him, "Look out your window and see if you see anything out of place." "What? What do you..." he said, but I was dead serious, and he ended up not questioning my order. The fear in his eyes said it all. "Cassie, what the fuck? What's this?" I didn't know, really. Those lights were dancing in the sky, going up and down, left and right. There was about a dozen of them. They were bigger than stars, almost the same size as the moon, and I can't even begin to describe the horror I felt back then. It was beautiful, but in a frightening way, like an exotic and dangerous animal. During episodes of severe insomnia, it may happen that you see things that aren't really there, like a mind glitch. You put your keys on your bedside table, but the next morning they're next to the couch and you just didn't realize what you were seeing in detail. You take a vague shape and give it whatever form it's easier for your brain. I never happened to hallucinate, but everything has its first time. Was all this really real? I thought it wasn't until Sebastian confirmed it. 2 people don't hallucinate the same thing. It was real, too real. I don't know for how long we stayed there, mesmerized and horrified at the same time. It could be 10 minutes or 2 hours, I really can't tell. And I don't even know how we made it to the closest city in safety. All I know is that next morning, we tried to explain it in the most rational way possible. That adorable lady drugged us and we tripped balls that night. We called Sebastian's parents to say that we were going to be late for a little bit, coming up with an excuse so we could make it back to that diner. Was it a bad idea? Obviously, but we did it anyway. We went back and forth that patch, even going further until the last city we stopped before that diner, but we couldn't find anything. And when we asked locals about it, we just received confused looks. There was no diner on that part of the highway. A few questions remained, and I'm afraid I can't answer them. Things simply stopped making sense at some point. What were those orbs we saw? Who was that old lady who served us? And if it wasn't a diner, then where did we eat that night?
It's felt like years. Allow me to explain. It was a vivid summer day, and I had taken a short notice trip to Arizona, trying to find some relief from the tiresome sunshine state on the other side of the nation. I only decided to leave when I was hit with a rather heavy day at work. My boss decided to chew me out for running late, despite the massive car crash on the motorway. A customer yelled at me because they didn't know what a Gmail was. Yeah, because I can definitely control traffic. And yeah, I definitely want to explain to you what Gmail is. I hate working customer service, so I called in sick and caught a last-minute flight to Phoenix. Phoenix. Yeah, Phoenix. Nice and far away from the hell I called home. I wish I'd never decided to do that. Around 2 days into my trip, I decided to head up to Zion Canyon for some sightseeing. I had spent a lot of time around the Grand Canyon and figured I should set some time apart to check out other places in the area. Besides, I'd never been to Utah before. Maybe I would take a hike, that one trail I had already read upon. Angel's Landing looked dangerous, but it would be something incredible to experience, and certainly worth it if I made the summit. I turned on Google Maps, and my rather shitty Android fumbled around with it until finally it picked up the location. The voice of a robotic woman began to speak. It was the damn GPS lady. She guided me through several backwater roads with twists and turns and roundabouts, until she stopped with a final sentence. Head on Highway 89. Continue straight for 184 miles. Alright, Seemed easy enough. As I finally approached the highway, I was absolutely in awe by the view. No more buildings remained, only the wild, barren landscape of the southwest. Mountains peaked in the distance, covered by desert shrubs. Old trailers and abandoned houses dotted the landscape. Everything was so beautiful compared to the constant headache that was Florida. My eyes soaked up the desert views, relieved that for once it wasn't just endless miles of swampland. I felt so isolated. I was free from civilization for miles. But something was wrong. The desert didn't feel real to me. The sun was too bright, the mountains too still, and the sky too blue. The whole landscape seemed too picturesque, as if it were straight out of a postcard. It felt as though it were all a facade to drag me into something, and it was not unlike something straight out of a fever dream. You know those mornings as a kid when you wake up with a pounding headache and sense of false reality? I'd been driving for hours, and the scenery just seemed to remain stagnant. I was so sure I'd spent the entire damn day on the road, but the sun hadn't moved an inch. Was I hallucinating? God, when was this road ever going to end? Speaking of it, I'm still here. I've been driving on this road every day. It only keeps on going and going. I've been seeing the same road signs over and over. There's no civilization around. I've tried knocking on those trailer doors, but no one's ever home. And you know what else? Despite my solitude, I feel like I'm constantly being chased. I hate that feeling. That same feeling from when you're a kid and you sprint up the stairs from the pinch of darkness down, not daring to look back at whatever was behind you. That feeling when any source of noise of your house was enough to make you jump and run for your life. The source of the noise for me was the booming. And that feeling is always here. Every once in a while I hear a booming, as if someone is going at it with a gigantic drum. I slow my car down, and the booming gets faster, closer and louder. And that feeling, every time I slow, the feeling grows stronger, as if whatever it was is getting closer. It's like whatever that something is hunting me down, almost testing me, and every time I stop the booming gets louder, as if it's targeting me. I don't know what that is, but I feel like it's dangerous. I don't know what chases behind me, but I know better than the kid who runs away from his basement door the first chance he gets. Running away from that something, but that something is behind me. I don't know what it is, but it's got me trapped right where it wants me to be, and I can't get out. I've driven off cliffs and into rivers, yet I wake up on the side of the road again, to the same sight, my truck waiting for me to drive off again. I can't even commit suicide. The place won't let me. I've tried communicating through whatever internet I could scrounge up on my phone, but I don't even know if anyone has seen my cries for help. The screen just shows up blank, save for my own words written in desperation. No one will ever answer my texts. No one will answer my calls. I will never see any other cars. Only me. I never get hungry, or tired, or thirsty. Only trapped. It's like time hasn't passed. Time hasn't passed. Everyone is gone. Something's chasing me, and I'm still writing this. I think I've been in the same spot for too long. The boom's only getting louder, and now something is right behind me. Time has not passed, and I need to get out. Now.
I love to adventure. Being to almost 50 states, I've seen my fair share of diversity between nature and people. My main reasons for travel is to explore the wilderness. Sometimes I'll backpack the Rocky Mountains, which I have some fucking messed up stories about as well, drive through national parks, and then drive through the desert. Growing up on the East Coast, I didn't get to experience the desert much, so I tend to favor a desert drive over a mountainous drive. I've been doing this for a couple years now, and haven't experienced anything too odd in the desert other than the sheer feeling of aloneness when out there. My favorite time to drive through the desert is at night though, because the stars illuminate the desert floor. About a month ago, however, I saw more than just the stars on this particular desert drive. I was going through the desert in Arizona. Nightfall was closing in on me, which was one of the best times. The sunset across the desert brought me to a whole new place. Sometimes I would even camp out in my car because, in a sense, I loved how alone I was out there. Normally, I'd bring my dog with me, but my parents were in town and they decided to watch over him, so I was all alone this time. Again, with night fast approaching, I didn't know whether to camp out or keep driving home. I figured my parents would want to see me, and I was only about an hour from the house, so I continued the trek on through the quickly darkening desert. If any of you have been through the desert in Arizona, you know that you occasionally see horses along the side of the road. So seeing figures on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere wasn't anything out of the ordinary. With only 45 minutes to get home, my high beams picked up on a different figure on the side of the road. It looked like a person. Being the overly generous person that I am, I pulled over by the person to see what was wrong. As I approached, I noticed the person wasn't moving though. They were just sitting upright. He didn't seem to notice that I was even there. His head never turned. "Are you okay?" I asked. No answer. In fact, no acknowledgement that I had even said anything. The man was poorly dressed, rather pale, but surprisingly clean-shaven. He was oddly skinny though, and the more I focused in on him, the more I realized how abnormally skinny he was. I was driving by and I noticed you. I just wanted to make sure you were okay," I told him. Still nothing. He was staring straight at the ground. I stood there awkwardly for a couple seconds until I finally saw his jaw move. "I need some water," he let out. His voice was deep. It didn't sound like a person though. I can't quite explain it, but his voice just sounded off. "Okay, man, let me grab you some out of the car," I told him. I started walking away as my car was about 10 or 15 feet in front of him. I walked to the passenger door and reached for my bottle of water. Before I could reach it though, I just sensed that something was off. I jolted my head around to where the man was sitting, but he was gone. I was panicking now, but for no real reason. He obviously wasn't of a threat, but I didn't know where the fuck he'd went. I closed the passenger door and took a quick look around. I heard movement from behind a rock about 10 to 20 feet off the road. A man emerged from behind the rock, but it wasn't the same man. This guy looked crazed, and he was holding something in his hand. He was running towards me. I jumped in my car and floored it down the road. As I looked back in my rearview mirror, I realized there were more of them, maybe 5 or 6, all emerging from behind rocks and right off the road. They were staring at me as I sped off. I had no intention of slowing down. In fact, I would be happy if I got pulled over by a cop. I would have felt so much safer. Within about 3 or 4 minutes of that happening, I felt relaxed enough to play some music. I took one last glance in my rearview mirror. I shivered. I was in complete shock when I saw the man I had offered water to sitting in my back seat staring at me. His eyes, oh God, those eyes. They weren't looking at me. They were looking into me. I was, of course, slamming on the brakes at this point, still in too much shock to make any noise. I couldn't take my eyes off him. He started to smile just like that man back there did. It was crazed. He had a look of death on his face. "You're going to be one of us soon," he started as he lifted up a knife. I jolted out of the car and I could hear the back door opening. This guy was fast, unhumanly fast. I couldn't outrun him for long. "Are you ready?" the deep voice shouted as he quickly approached me. It was dark out now too. I had no clue where to go. It was over, or so I thought. Headlights were approaching us both. I was a couple of 100 feet from my car now, but I didn't hear the man behind me anymore. The car was fast approaching me, and I tried signaling it down. Thank the Lord it saw me and stopped. After explaining to the man driving what had happened, he tried phoning the police. Sadly, he had no signal. His name was Mark, and he agreed to follow me home just in case anything else happened. He also had a pistol on him, which really made me feel safe. After about 35 minutes of driving with Mark behind me the whole way, I finally made it back home. After thanking him, I went to go check the back seat of my car to make sure all my stuff was still there or if he had left anything. Luckily, everything of mine was still there. I did, however, notice a sheet of paper on the top of my backpack. I opened it up. "You aren't safe. You'll be one of us soon," the note read. A chill ran through my body. I heard a footstep in the front of my car and jolted up. "The dog threw up," my mom said, standing right in front of my car. I went back inside, but didn't say anything to my parents. They're not people who would believe any of that crap. I figured I would call the police and let them know what happened after they left. "Oh yeah, and some guy stopped looking for you about 20 minutes ago," my mom started. "Who?" I asked. "I'm not sure, he didn't give a name. He was a rather skinny guy, deep voice, didn't talk much. He gave me a letter to give to you. I didn't open it because, well, why open someone else's mail? It was weird, something didn't seem right about him, but I figured you know a lot of people. So here's the letter." She handed me an enclosed envelope. My heart was racing again. As soon as my parents left, I opened the note. "We know where you live," the note read. My heart sank. After calling the cops and explaining everything, they investigated it for a little while. Sadly, they found no sign of the people along the section of the road I was on. I gave them the letter for DNA reasons, but still haven't heard anything back. I installed a security system in my house and haven't had any problems since.
Tonight, my sister, brother-in-law, and 2 friends and I all piled into a truck and we headed out to the desert near the old Cal Portland concrete factory. About half hour into driving, kicking up dust and messing around, everyone gets the chills, and my anxiety starts to flare up. We brush it off as the temperature difference and just keep going. 10 minutes later, we come around a corner and my sister says, "Please tell me you guys just saw that woman." We responded with, "What woman?" She says, "We just passed a woman standing on the side of the road wearing pink. I think it was a pink shirt, and she had blonde hair that was covering her face. She looked dead." I honestly thought she was messing with me. So we turn around and go to the spot where she saw her. No woman. Brother-in-law and I get our flashlights out and look around. No woman. I tell my sister she's seeing things, and she insists that she saw a woman. So I decide to check my dashcam footage. Sure as shit, there was a woman. She was crossing the road, it looks like, and she just vanishes into thin air. My camera isn't of the best quality by any means, and it was quite dark, but it's clear what we saw. My brother-in-law and I canvassed a 2-mile square radius with flashlights calling out to the woman because we legitimately thought that someone was lost out in the desert. The entire time we kept feeling and hearing things around us. Some info to note, this was right next to an extremely murky pond. There is a possibility that her body could be hidden in the pond.
My dad is a journalist and a nonfiction writer, but at the time was a reporter for the Virginia Pilot based out of Virginia. He was working on a new book titled The Big Roads when this occurred. We often went on road trips for his research needs, and once his proposal for this new book was accepted, we went on a cross-country trip from Virginia to California and back down on old Route 66 for the book. Me being 13 at the time, I demanded that he let me bring a friend along, and so we were 3. The first quarter of our month-long adventure went off without a hitch. We either stayed in motels with the occasional stay at a grand old historic hotel. My dad, being the outdoors man that he is, decided that we would camp about 5 or 6 times throughout the trip. The first night we camped, we were in the middle of literal nowhere. No one for at least 20 miles on either side in the middle of the Utah desert. When we arrived at our campsite in our rented minivan, my dad wanted to explore a bit, because at the bottom of the hill that our campsite was situated on was an old Pony Express stop. My friend decided to stay in the minivan until my dad and I finished checking out the Pony Express stop to set up camp on account of all the wasps and bees. We were utterly alone, and as a rather jumpy and skittish 13-year-old girl, it became apparent we were isolated to the point that if anything happened, we would be screwed. That's all I could think about as my dad and I walked down the hill to explore. We checked out the old gas station, and everything was going smoothly until we were about halfway back up the hill. A large truck that we noticed driving down the old dirt road a few minutes before had turned into the campsite. We were surprised, but really didn't think anything of it. Maybe this guy was on an adventure too. The truck parked halfway up the road and a man got out. He had what I think was a hunting rifle and started hunting around the area my dad and I were on, about 50 feet from our campsite. Of course, this was an absolute no hunting zone, and my dad became a bit concerned because my friend was closer to the stranger than she was to us. He yelled to the man saying that there were children around and that he couldn't hunt here. As soon as the man turned to face us, I got an overwhelming sense of complete doom. I felt in my entire body that something was not right. The man looked us over and without saying a word, aimed his gun at us. My dad does not carry a gun or knife or any kind of weapon. I felt trapped. My dad ushered me behind a large boulder, but he didn't hide. He stood his ground. There was a solid minute of this man aiming his gun at my dad and my dad standing completely still and staring back. In my mind, I considered all of the ways this could go down. I was absolutely terrified this guy would shoot my dad and somehow my friend and I would have to escape or get murdered during this tense minute. The guy lowered his gun, cocked his head to the side, and pointed my dad using the fake gun fingers and fake shot him. He then got in his truck and drove away. That night my friend and I slept in the minivan in 90-degree heat because I was positive this guy would come back and murder us all. He didn't come back. A few other creepy incidents occurred on that trip, but we were fine and safe after all.
Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I'd like to say a huge thank you to the incredible Mr. Davis for helping me out in this video. He is an amazing talent and a wonderful person and friend. So please go check out his channel. Follow the link on screen now and in the description to show him some well-deserved love. Remember that if you want to share a story, all that you need to do is submit it as a text post on my Reddit page or send it to me via email. Both links can be found in the description. And if you enjoyed today's video, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to not miss your daily dose of horror. Because if you don't hit like, YouTube will assume the video is uninteresting. So please, give it a bit of love. And if you'd like to do something truly amazing today to help support the channel, you now can via Patreon. You can find the link in the description as well as the links to my social media pages. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.